Hey there, guys, and welcome to another exciting installment of Nightmares and Scares. I'm Dan. I'll be the host this evening, this creepy hour. And with me, I have the show channel runner,
My name is Matt.
Matt. Before we get started here at Nightmares and Scares, and again, you guys are tuning in to our second episode. Usually, we just like to touch base, see how things are going. So, Matt, what's new with you, my friend? How are you doing today?
I am very I'm good. I'm grateful to be here. But I gotta admit I'm very tired. I'm exhausted. I had a very busy weekend. I was home very little this weekend. I was off making a movie in movie land, and spent most of this past Saturday, almost the entire day filming. And then turned around, got done just in time to turn around and go to a WrestleMania party. So, whew, I was dead tired Saturday, only for more stuff to keep me busy Sunday, including night two of WrestleMania, because you can't just have one night of it anymore. Um, so and then I worked all day today. I'm tired, but I'm here, and I'm excited to get into the cabin in the woods. Uh, how about you, if you didn't already say?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. For those of you who don't know, because we don't release these videos the same days that we record, we just came out of the solar eclipse today, where we're located at about 89% blockage by the moon, if you will. So it was pretty cool. The kids got out. We were taking a look up at the moon, and what better day to talk about scary stories, nightmares, and scares than the day of the solar eclipse? So
For
super
sure.
excited to get into this. Matt and I have been going back and forth choosing movies. Again, we've been doing podcasts forever, but this time was my pick. So we're going deep into The Cabin in the Woods. Um, Now, The Cabin in the Woods, we're going to go ahead and kick it right off some of the facts when it came out. So the director of this was Drew Goddard. The two head writers on this, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard. Surprise, surprise, he came back. Really had some up and comers. Also had some folks that had already been established in the industry for a while. The top cast: Kristen Connolly as Dana, Chris Hemsworth as Kurt, Anna Hutchison as Jules, Fran Krantz as Marty, Jesse Williams as Holden, and then we also see some folks: Richard Jenkins as Sitterson, Bradley Whitford's Hadley, and then we have an appearance later on in the movie by the director Matt, who made a little bit of a cameo appearance in this. Do you remember?
Spoilers. None other than the legend herself, Sigourney Weaver. Um, of course, if you don't know who this is, then are you truly a horror fan? I guess you could be said sci-fi, but I mean that's Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection. She's a legend in the genre.
So when we're talking about this, it was kind of surprising. I think that she made a role and maybe became a little bit of a draw there. But overall, for those who are new to the film, maybe you've never heard of it. It was released back in April 15th, 2012. Its opening weekend was held in the U.S. and Canada, where it grossed about $14 million. Overall, the budget for the film was $30 million. It ultimately ended up grossing about $42 million in Canada and the U.S. combined, and then worldwide about $70 million. So even though this film had humble beginnings, it really didn't break any box office records. It did at least recoup its budget, and later would become a cult classic. Folks ended up flocking to this, and it does have quite a following, which is why it's super exciting that we're able to talk about it with you today. And then we do have a runtime of 1 hour and 35 minutes. If you stuck with us for the last episode, you'll know that Matt ended up going for a play-by-play review of what happened in the movie, and I'd about kick that off. But just off the top, before I start going into a little bit of the overview of the film and what we saw, Matt, do you have any initial thoughts?
Uh, so I went to the movie theater and saw this back in what was it? What did we say? 2011, and Uh, I remember coming out of it confused and kind of like, "Er?" Um, and over the years, I've watched it some more. I went a long time without watching it, and in the last couple of years, I feel like I've seen it more and more. And without getting too deep, I'll just say that uh, it's not my favorite. That's where I'll keep it.
I think as I've grown watching horror films, I really do enjoy horror films that end up poking fun at horror films and the genre itself. I'm a huge fan of the Scream franchise. Cabin in the Woods is no different for me. I really like how it pokes fun at itself. Other movies that are coming down the line, I think are kind of fun. Ready or Not was a good one for me. I thought kind of in the same wheelhouse. And I know there's another horror movie coming out this year, Abigail, which I'm hoping we'll be able to review after that comes out. Which again is more with that funny comedy slash horror, which keeps it exciting and I think keeps it fresh for me. So I'm not going to go super crazy in depth on the review for you guys, but just an overview. When the film kicks off, it's not what you would expect. So you're talking about the cabin in the woods. The first thing you're introduced to is a facility, and you have like people riding around on golf carts. We have people that are working on computers, running paperwork, and all this other stuff, and some gentlemen talking back and forth about a facility that something's gone wrong, but Japan has never failed, and then they're also in the running, so they pretty much got whatever's going on in the bag. So kind of interesting as you go through, and then we have a cut scene. So where Matt ends up talking about getting confused, I mean, I could see how the average viewer could get confused, especially if it's your first time watching. You really don't understand how that ties into everything because then we cut to the kids, and it becomes more of what I would call a mainstream horror film at this point, where we are introduced to our characters that you pretty much get the feeling are probably going to end up in trouble. Well, later on, you have again the list of the actors. We meet Dana, Kurt, Jules, Marty, Holden, Sitterson. I'm sorry, we already met Sitterson. But Dana's in a room. She's getting changed. Her best friend is Jules. She goes to school with. Chris is Jules' boyfriend, and then he also brings his friend Jesse along with him. So we're introduced in a room. There's some playful banter going back and forth, and then you kind of get the feeling. Well, they start to introduce the cabin in the woods. So it's Kurt's cousin has a cabin, right? And they're going to go visit it. They're going to go out and do some stuff. Um, and then we get ready to load out in the van. We go forward a little bit. We're also introduced to this character, Marty. And how does he show up but rolling up in his old car? He has a huge bong. They start talking about him, how he didn't get pulled over by the cops. He ends up sliding it shut. There's smoke that was billowing out from his car. He's like, "What are you talking about? It's just a mug." And my favorite part, probably in this whole beginning sequence, is that he ends up um, locking his car from the outside. So he reaches back in the open window, locks it. I mean, they're trying to really build this guy out as like a stoner. So, and they do a good job. Later on, they're hopping into their RV. They're going down a road, and they're introduced to a character we later learn is called the Harbinger, who basically tells them to turn back. Um, and they don't heed the warning or their advice, and they just continue on heading up to this cabin. So when they get to the cabin, I really got an Evil Dead vibe from the cabin itself. It's run down, kind of broken. They start exploring a little bit into it, and inside they find things like two or one-way mirrors that the gentleman could see Dana through. You also have just old things is creepy. The atmosphere is very creepy, and it almost sets the perfect, almost like a copy of Cabin in the Woods. And I would say another little Easter egg, just a little bit further into the film, we have that little trap door that flies open in there, and you know what? That has Cabin in the Woods vibe, or Cabin in the Woods. That has Evil Dead vibes all over it too. And they were playing a game of Truth and Dare, or Truth or Dare, and the scene was really set to push Dana out of her comfort zone. They ended up going into the basement, and here's where we find out that there's a whole bunch of artifacts that are in this room. And depending on what they pick, that's pretty much how they're set up to die. And then we have flashbacks back to this big facility, and it's talking about how they're taking bets. And you see some different names scrolled up on the board. There's things like zombies, there's unicorns, there's vampires. There's was it the one that ultimately gets unveiled in the film. We later on see the redneck zombie family or the Holden family. Um, so as we get into this, and also I'm sorry, don't forget the mermaids. They could have also been killed by mermaids. Um,
Mysterious.
so when we end up getting into this, each of the teenagers is drawn into one of these items in the room. And as they start looking at them, one of them starts playing like a little puzzle box that resembles something out of Hellraiser. You have one that's playing with a musical box and a ballerina spinning. And honestly, you get kind of the vibe of the Abigail movie that's coming out, which I thought was kind of funny. You end up seeing all these things, and they're throwbacks or Easter eggs to these other horror films. And ultimately, we have Dana who ends up reading out of a book. It says, "Hey guys, look at this," and they all put their respective items back down, and they end up reading out of this um, journal. And just long and short of it is, a young girl that was writing into the journal. Her family is going through some pretty traumatic stuff. It's not good. There's mentions of people that are getting fed coals or having coals, hot coals stuffed in their stomach. It's very violent, very crazy. And then she starts to read a line in Latin, which, guys, if you're in horror, like anybody who's ever watched a horror movie, don't read Latin or dead languages out of books that you find in mysterious cabins in the middle of the
I,
wood.
I thought it was funny that they even in the movie, he's like, "Don't you definitely shouldn't read the Latin part." Like I don't know the exact line, but he's like telling her not to read the stuff in the book, and then when she goes, and then it goes into Latin. He's like, "Okay, I'm putting my foot down. Definitely don't read the Latin part." Like,
I think Marty is probably the most meta character out of this whole thing, and he definitely does point back to those little instances, and it just keeps going throughout the film. Like, hey, we shouldn't do this. We should do this. But ultimately, the odds are stacked against them because once she reads from this book, guess what? The electrical department wins the wager, so they win the money. But also, we start to see that they can control the atmosphere and the environment. That they being the folks down in this facility. So Sitterson, the other gentleman we talked about earlier, they pretty much are in charge of this operation. They're able to pump hormones into the environment. They can change different noises. They can shine lights down. It's almost like a giant containment grid for these teenagers. So, what do teenagers do when they're out in the middle of the woods? Well, they start to get a little funky and they want to go make some love out in the middle of the forest. So, when they do end up turning the heat up in this environment, they pump the pheromones to get the two teenagers, Kurt and his girlfriend, ready to do something. That's when we skipped the truth and dare scene where we kiss the wolf. But out in the middle of the woods, that's where we're first introduced to the redneck zombie family. They stab the young lady in the hand. She's the first one to die, and then we're also told that this is part of a ritual that is to appease uh, an ancient set of gods. And basically, the whole thing comes down to each one of these characters is assigned a role that they are sacrifices of. So the first one, and this is not my verbiage, this is the verbiage from the movie, was classed as a whore. Um, and they killed her first. Apparently, that's how the whole ritual has to start. She has to die first. And then the virgin is saved for last. So, over the course of the film, we see that Marty gets drugged out into the middle of the woods. We see was it Kurt, I guess, would be the next one in line. He ends up trying to escape. He finds a dirt bike. He's going to jump over this ravine, get to the other side. So he's really heroic, ready to go. And he goes up and he hits an invisible barrier and falls down to his death. So again, there was no way of escape for these guys. There was no way they could possibly go. So then we're put back into the RV, and then we have Dana and Holden that are riding back in the RV. They're like, hey, we got to stick together. We don't want to split up. And I thought that was another thing because in the cabin when the attack first happened, and I did gloss over this, Kurt had made a mention, hey, we need to stick together. We need to make sure that we're fighting for each other. And then they do something to him from the control booth, and he's like, oh no, never mind. We need to split up and start barricading each of the rooms. So again, that separation, there's mental tactics, there's the ability to sway, and then out of nowhere, when they're in the RV, gentleman gets stabbed in the back of the neck with either a sickle or like a long knife, something to that effect. So Dana is pretty much by herself, or so we think. Everybody's celebrating because the ritual's gone off without a hitch. Everyone's died up to this point except for Dana, and she has to be the last one to die. And she is getting absolutely wrecked with I would say like a Jason Voorhees variant, pretty much out in the middle of the swamp on a deck. He is like just tossing her and throwing her and kicking her while everybody's celebrating, popping champagne. Hey, we've done it! We saved the world! Da 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 da. It's a good thing too because apparently Japan's gone down. They weren't able to contain the spirits. Like we were the last hope, and we've done it. And then all of a sudden, we find out, or we get a telephone call. Things haven't gone as planned. Wait, who's that? So you think, hey, is it Kurt? Is it Holden? It's not. It's Marty. Marty has somehow gotten away from being stabbed and saved Dana. Ultimately, when these characters are brought into this, I'd say, an arena or controlled setting, they come up through some sort of box or containment thing that rises to the surface. Dana and Marty find their way back to this, and they end up going through a huge matrix of different characters. Later, I found out that there was an agreement with the movie company and Left 4 Dead that Left 4 Dead was going to allow them to use some of their video game characters in this, and vice versa. Like they would establish some scenery or downloadable content from the cabin in the woods to be included in the game. Don't know if you've ever played that game, but it's very fun, especially if you want to do multiplayers. But skipping that, we start to see some characters that do resemble Pinhead. We see the ballerina with the teeth for a face, and lots of other characters through this network. And we do have also in the background part of this. There's some strangers like people. There's giant spiders. There's vampire bats. There's werewolves. There's pretty much every horror movie you could imagine that was used or could have been used in this scenario to save the world from the ancient ones. So they ultimately get off of the platform, and all heck pretty much breaks loose. There's a gentleman who, or I say gentleman, there's a guard that meets them outside the containment center because they're aware that they made it inside of it. He ultimately gets killed. Marty picks up his gun. There's a shootout scenario that happens. They end up getting into a control booth that controls all of these rooms and panels. And Dana starts hitting some buttons. And then we unleash holy hell on everybody in this facility. We have all the monsters that are released wave after wave after wave. And we have SWAT characters that come in trying to shoot them and put them down. And they just get obliterated. We start seeing the folks that were celebrating earlier screaming in terror that they just can't make it anymore, and gets to the point where the characters ultimately break into the main control room where Citizen R and the other gentleman and also the main security guard that was kind of questioning their morals and ethics the entire time. We fast forward a little bit. There's blood everywhere. Marty and Dana end up sneaking out. They've made it to the control room, and she had a knife in her hand. She comes around a corner, stabs Sitterson. He ends up unveiling the fact that Marty's got to die or else the world is going to end. So that's where we go, and they end up going further down into the complex until they come to the room where all the sacrificial, I guess the blood comes from. I don't know if it's theirs. They just have vials that break open and then flood the area, so or that fill out the outlines of the different characters. So once that happens, we're introduced to the director. She ends up coming to the room again, talking about how the only thing to do is Marty has to die. Dana has gotten a hold of the pistol. she seems to be in line with the program at that point. She's about to shoot Marty, and who pops up? The younger girl from the zombie family that we were talking about earlier. And it's not Marty, it's not Dana that gets killed. It is our dear friend, the director. So goodbye. It was a nice little cameo. You're falling off the edge of the map. You're gone. And then Dana and Marty, ultimately, the complex starts to shake. They're thrown into the bottom of this large pit area, and they start talking about it, about the end of the world. And they pretty much decide that the world's not really worth saving. It's just what's so good about it. They sit down, they're covered in blood. All the insides on their outsides of everybody else they've come across, and they're just smoking a cigarette or smoking a joint. I'm sorry, they're just smoking a joint and just talking about the end of the world. And the next thing you know, the ground starts to shake. A giant hand erupts from the below and tears through them and tears through the cabin, and the cabin is no more. And thus ends the story of the cabin in the woods. So, Matt, I know we asked you for your initial thoughts off the beginning of this. I don't think I went too crazy long on the recap. Hopefully not anyway. But what were your favorite parts? What were your least favorite parts? Tell us. What was your overall feeling on the Cabin in the Woods, Matt?
So you did really good. It took me an hour to get through The Omen, so you did pretty good. No, this film tries way too hard to be what it's trying to be. Like you said, it's meta. It it's making fun of the genre. But I think there's a right way and a wrong way you can do that. I know a lot of people enjoy this movie. I know that it's it's loved, but I like I mentioned, kind of hinted at. I just don't like this movie. I don't. And I try because I feel like a part of me wants to like this movie, and but I think it's so it puts its tongue in its cheek so hard that it leaves this big gaping hole of what could have been filled by a great movie. The potential is there for a great movie. And I think that's what frustrates me about this movie because there's potential. There's so much potential for this to be awesome, but it just doesn't hit the mark for me. I mean, in the entire movie, there's probably 15 minutes that I think are actually good, um, where it works and I'm with it. And for those minutes is why I know we'll get to a rating here in a little bit, but why I'm going to rate it what I am, um, for the minutes that work. So I'm going to give it some credit. Uh, but it's just I just feel like it's missing so much, and then not so much the movie's missing so much, but the script misses the mark. And it's Joss Whedon, who for those who don't know, uh, also wrote or directed. I guess he didn't write. He directed the Justice League movie after Zack Snyder had to step down due to family emergency, and we saw the night and day difference between a Joss Whedon movie and a Zack Snyder movie with the whole release the Snyder cut. And we saw the 4-hour version of Zack Snyder's movie, what we should have gotten versus the Joss Whedon version, which was trash. I'm not going to go so far as to say that this movie is trash, but I would rate this just a few levels above Joss Whedon's uh, Justice League. Sorry.
Well, I mean, Josh Whedon, I think, has some other credits to him too, right? Like he was involved in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think he was involved in Angel. There was a lot of other ones I think he, contributed to.
And
But
there's people that love those too. I'm not knocking those, but like I've never been a fan of any of that.
okay,
I haven't taken the time to sit down and watch every episode of those shows, but I know from what I've seen, it's just never grabbed me. I don't think I've seen. I have to go through. I don't think I've seen one Josh Whedon thing that I've thoroughly enjoyed.
okay. Well, I think that for me, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to pick it. It's just one of those that it's fun and it takes the idea of horror and it kind of tries to do something new. And I feel like we've entered an era where everything is so recycled, and maybe we change it a little bit or repackage it or we rebrand it. Something like out of Jurassic Park line, right? Like we rebrand it, we put it, but slap it on a lunchbox, sell it. And I feel like that's what a lot of horror movies do. And this one didn't. It said, you know what? We're not just going to tackle one part of horror. We're going to take on the whole freaking thing and we're going to put it into a film. And I don't think you could have done that much better than you did here. And I think there's so many Easter eggs. You could pause this thing and look at all the characters that are in the little boxes, and you can name the different things or places that they came out of. Especially when they get loose and start tearing into the folks in the little base. And I think it's kind of interesting is that the people inside of this facility treat this so like another day at work
Hmm.
that it just gives that element of like surrealism or something. And it just like, how is it that you are okay with people getting murdered? And I know they try to like cross that with the security guy that used to be in the military that's in the room with them. Pardon me, see if I can figure out his name. So that was Truman. Sorry, Truman. So when Truman in the room and he starts to question all this, and you can tell that he doesn't enjoy the thought of folks being torn apart inside of the little containment area, the teenagers getting killed, and he asks about it. But they really just, and you're right, as far as a horror movie goes, you could have had a recycled again Friday the 13th. They're out in the middle of a cabin. They get wrecked by a serial killer, cult like things, entities, whatever, like stealing some ideas from Cabin in the Woods. And you probably do get 15, 20 minutes of that in the film where they're being chased by the zombie family before it starts getting to the overarching thing, which I think is the point it's trying to make anyway. But overall, I thought the idea was fresh. It was something new and exciting, and I give them high marks for pulling out something that I thought was thoroughly enjoyable. So, without further ado, Matt, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so do we want to go into one of our new segments, which is real reviews, where we pull real star rating reviews from the interwebs? We do a 5-star rating and we do a 1-star rating.
I think we
Um,
do, and I think in the tradition that we're probably doing here, as far as rotation, I'll let you take the 1-star review, and I'll do the
sure.
five
Yeah, no,
star.
I was actually going to suggest that. So you did the 1-star last time, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
I'll do the 1-star. Emily Woo 0221 says my 4-year-old dog could come up with a better story than this. And that sums it up, Emily. For me, I am team Emily on this one. Dan, what's our 5-star review?
So by Josh, we got so effing good. I would die for Chris Hemsworth. Amazing watch for all horror fans. A fun parody on the genre itself, and that's the whole thing, right? You can't watch this in itself as just a horror film. It is a parody of horror films. So I think you get it. You understand it. Thank you. And as far as dying for Chris Hemsworth, that might be a little much for me, but
Yeah, Josh. I mean, maybe. I was gonna say it's 2024. Not judging, but I mean, come on, Josh. Chris
yeah,
Hemsworth.
because this
At
came
least, at
out
least Marty. At least
before
Marty. Go for
before
Marty.
Chris Hemsworth became Thor that we know and love. So that's
Yeah,
another
this
part
might
to
have
it.
been the first. Either this or Red Dawn was like the Red Dawn remake was like the first time I ever saw Chris Hemsworth, and then he blew up everywhere because of Thor. Um, yeah. So how do we want to rate this ourselves? Do we want to do, last time we did 1 out of 10, with the Omen. Do
About
we want to do 1 out of 10 giant
giant ancient
hands?
god hands. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
on the same page.
that's okay. We're on the same page. Okay. I'm just gonna, not to end the show on a sour note. I'll go first. I'm at a 4
Oof,
giant ancient god
oof.
hands with this, and that is me being generous. I really was at like a 2 with this, but I bumped it up to a 4.
Well, that's so nice of you to bump that up a couple. I'm gonna go with 8 hands and a thumbs up. Like I think this is a pretty good movie. It was enjoyable for me. I could watch it. I've watched this movie several times at this point, and I don't think it loses its appeal to me anytime I watch it. So that's where we're at. Alrighty, guys. So if you're following us, please let us know because we're a little divided on this one. This being the second movie in the series here. Do you agree with Matt? Was this something that really missed the mark as a horror film? You really didn't feel engaged by it? You think honestly you could just pass it by as something that should be left in the heap or written by a 4-year-old dog? Maybe it would turn out better quality if it was. Or do you agree with me? Do you think that this was a fun poke at the horror genre? Do you think that it was exciting, kept you interested, and it was fresh and kind of revitalized it a little bit? Let us know down in the comments. Please like, subscribe, share. Um, and I let Matt talk about any closing comments he makes, and I also allow Matt the privilege because we're doing the rotation. He'll be able to pick the next film that we will be reviewing on Nightmares and Scares channel. So, Matt, final thoughts, and where are we going next week or next time?
So, I was going to say, uh, oh, so this is the first. I lost it for a second. So this is the first. Is this the first time we've ever disagreed on a thing on a movie?
Maybe that would be
I don't. I
crazy. It might
can't. I
be.
can't think. I can't think of another specific time where we're like drastically apart. I mean, we've not. I mean, when we've rated stuff before, like we've never been like we've been on the same a lot, but then we're usually like 2 or 3 off, but never like a 4 and an 8. um, like it's like, do we watch the same movie type of thing? Um, so that's interesting, and that's what I think is kind of fun to me about doing a horror show, because horror is something that I think I know we both love so much. I know I personally, it is well, I think Dan said last week about when talking about me, I love all genres. Horror is probably, if not number 1, then very like 1.5 as far as like my favorite genres of all time. And I am passionate about it. And whereas when I watch like dramatic films or things like that, like films, I'm more willing to usually be like, yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. But I think it's because I'm always looking for something good in it. I'm trying to find the good. And I do that with horror as well. But I think because I love the genre so much that I have more of a backbone, shall we say, to be like, no, this movie is effing garbage. Um, so that should be interesting because there's going to be times, and I know, I mean, this was kind of just one of them, but there's going to be times where I think we're going to disagree a lot.
I have a theory, Matt, that you're going to gravitate more towards the ones that are classic, like classic horror. And I
For
feel like I'm
sure.
going to be the ones that are more like the edge. I'm not
For
sure.
sure. For
I'm sure
sure.
that
I
we
mean,
will agree on some of
but
the
I
more.
also, yeah, no, for sure. But I love the classic stuff. But I also love a wide range of the stuff that nobody's ever heard of. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where we line up.
Yeah.
With that said, next time on Nightmares and Scares, uh, please be sure to come back and join us because we will be watching and discussing 28 Days Later, the zombie flick uh, from director Danny Boyle. This is another one of those that could be considered a modern classic. It is not currently streaming anywhere. In fact, it is kind of unavailable. We have it because I had purchased it on my streaming service when it was available. Now it's kind of gone out of print, like physical media wise, it's out of print, and I don't know that it's streaming anywhere. But
But two, they're probably gearing up because there were rumors, or there is
yes, no,
talk
yeah,
that
there
there's.
is. It has been confirmed that there's a third movie coming, so I'm sure it won't be gone for long. But if you happen to own it physically, or if you're like me and bought it on like a Voodoo or something like that, then it is there, and that's where Dan and I will be watching, and we will be discussing all things 28 Days Later with a young
Killian.
Killian
Yep,
Murphy, um, in one of his first notable roles. So that's that.
that's that. Alrighty, guys. Well, again, tune in with us next time for your fill of the horror, terrifying tales, and cinematic scary pieces that is Nightmares and Scares. Alrighty, guys. This is Dan and Matt signing off. Catch you on the flip side.
See you in your nightmares.